by 2, that's also legitimate. I still have 2 divided by 2 on the right-hand side, which cancels each other out, and I'm left with just W. On the left-hand side, P divided by 2, there's nothing I can cancel there. I have my minus sign in between. And then I can cancel something here. 2 on top, 2 in the bottom, kind of similarly. They cancel each other out, and I'm left with just L there. So I would accept either of these answers because they're both technically correct. Looking at number 2. Number 2, again, if I have a fraction on the right-hand side, again, you guys have been really good with ratios and proportions. Let's make the left-hand side a fraction as well, aka a ratio. So this S, just throw it over 1. I now have a ratio or a fraction on the left-hand side and a ratio/fraction on the right-hand side. So I can use now cross multiplication in order to solve this problem. But keep in mind, I'm trying to get K by itself. So I'm eventually trying to get this K all by itself on one side of my equation. So let's look at the cross products. The first cross products I have. 1 times K minus 10F. Well, 1 times all this stuff is just whatever this stuff is. So it's K minus 10F. And that's all equal to my other cross products, S times P. So I have S times P. Again, I'm trying to solve for K. K is now on the left-hand side of my equation, and what's along with K that I need to get rid of? Well, this minus 10F stuff. So I need to get rid of that minus 10F. Well, how do I do that? I use inverse operations. This 10F is being subtracted away, so I need to do the inverse of that. I need to add exactly what this term is, 10F, to the left-hand side. If I add 10F to the left-hand side, I also have to add 10F to the right-hand side. And notice that I kind of segregated it off to the very far left. I did not write it underneath S and P because S and P and 10F, they're not like terms. They're not the same variable, so they cannot be combined. So when I do that, on the left-hand side, a negative 10F and then I add 10F, they cancel each other out. They're just 0. And I'm left with just K on the left-hand side. I got my equal sign in the middle. And I'm going to bring down exactly as everything appears. I cannot combine them. They're not like terms. So I have SP, and then I'm adding to that 10F. Hey, look, I solved for K. I got K all by itself on the left-hand side. This is my final solution now. K is equal to all this stuff, whatever S times P is, plus whatever 10 times F is. Moving on to the backhand side. Again, we have a word problem here. I'm not going to read through it. The two important things that I have to note are the formula that I'm given. So this formula right here. And then I'm trying to determine the height. So I'm trying to solve for the variable h. But if I were to read this, it says Ben and Jerry are planning to make the world's best ice cream cone. They know the volume and radius of the cone, but want to know what the height of the cone should be. Use the formula V equals 1/3 times pi times r squared times h to determine the height h of the world's best cone. So I have this. Volume equals 1/3 times pi times r squared times h. I just want to emphasize that all of these items are being multiplied together. Essentially, this is one giant term. One giant term. Remember, terms are separated either by an addition, subtraction, or an equal sign. The reason that this is one giant term is because it's just separated by multiplication, which again doesn't separate terms. So this is just one giant term on the right-hand side. Now, in order to be successful in this problem, it goes back to one of my hints. To remove fractions, use something called reciprocals. Notice that I'm not going to be doing like ratios and proportions on this problem. It's because there's only one fraction on the side. Like the whole side here is not fractions. If this entire side was fractions, I would highly encourage using ratios and proportions. But there's only one part of this term that is a fraction. If you have just like one part of your term that's a fraction, get rid of that fraction by using reciprocals. So we're going to multiply the left-hand side by the reciprocal of 1 over 3, which is just 3 over 1. Essentially, we're just multiplying by 3. 3 over 1 is just 3. So on the left-hand side, I'm multiplying by that exact same number, 3, or 3 over 1. Notice I didn't write this side as a fraction because v is not in terms of a fraction, so I just wrote it as 3 times. So on the left-hand side, I have 3 times v. In the middle, I have my equal sign. Now, on the right-hand side, when you multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, everything goes away. Everything meaning just the fraction. So I have 3 on top, 3 on the bottom. Essentially, 3 divided by 3. They cancel each other out. Same thing with the 1 on the top and the 1 on the bottom. They essentially cancel each other out. And so both of those fractions disappear, but I still have all this stuff left. So I have that pi times r squared times my h. Again, I'm trying to get h by itself. So now I'm trying to get h by itself, but I have all of this stuff in front of h, or multiplying h. Well, if this is just, all this is just a number. I don't know what the number is because I don't know what r is. But essentially, I have a number multiplying my h. Well, to undo a multiplication by that number, I just have to divide by exactly what that number is. In this case, I have to divide by pi r squared. And if I do that on the right-hand side, I have to do it on the left-hand side. So dividing by pi r squared. Now, on the left-hand side, there's nothing I can do to simplify. It's just 3v on the top, pi r squared on the bottom. Got my equal sign in the middle. But on the right-hand side, I have a pi on top, pi on the bottom. Essentially, pi divided by pi is 1, cancels itself out. Same thing with this r squared. I have r squared on top, r squared on the bottom. Well, r squared divided by r squared is just 1. They cancel each other out. And what I'm left with is just h. And that's exactly what I was trying to solve for. Height is equal to all of this stuff on the left-hand side. 3 times your volume divided by pi r squared. I want you to try the problems at the bottom. So it says you do. I'm going to go ahead and go into the solutions immediately. So go ahead and pause the video, but try these on your own to see if you're capable of doing this. But for number 4, go ahead and pause. Number 4, it says solve for y. Got my left-hand side and my right-hand side. I'm trying to get y by itself. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this term next to it, this 2x. And again, the symbol in front of that 2x, because there's not one, it's assumed to be a positive. So I have to do the opposite to get rid of it. I have to subtract away 2x. What I do to my left-hand side of my equation, I have to do to my right-hand side of my equation. And notice that I wrote, again, this minus 2x pretty far over, because I'm not going to be able to combine it with this negative 6. So I don't write it directly underneath there because I can't combine them. So on the left-hand side, I have 2x, and I just took away those 2x's. There's nothing left. There's no x's left. They cancel each other out. But what I'm left with is a negative y. So I have negative y, essentially a negative 1y. Got my equal sign in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, I have my minus 2x. And then I also have a minus 6. So I bring that down as well. Y is not by itself yet. There's a coefficient in front of it of a negative 1. So I have to get rid of that next. Well, that negative 1 is just multiplying my y. So to undo that, I'm going to divide by negative 1. I did the inverse of that multiplication. I divided by negative 1. Well, if I do that on the left-hand side, I also have to do it on the right-hand side. There's, again, more than one way to do this. I could just divide everything by negative 1, or I could divide each term on the right-hand side by negative 1. I'm dividing each term by the negative 1, by the way. So on the left-hand side, I have a negative 1 on top, negative 1 on the bottom. Essentially, a number divided by itself is just 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is just 1. So I'm left with just y on that side. Got my equal sign in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, essentially when you divide by a -1, all it's really going to do is just it's going to change the signs on the right-hand side. So a -2 divided by a -1, negative divided by a negative is a positive, and then 2 divided by 1 is just 2. So it's just 2x. Notice all it did was change the sign from a -2x to be a positive 2x. Same thing here. This used to be a -6. Well, now it's just going to change the sign to be the opposite of +6. Again, looking at that, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 6 divided by 1 is just 6. So I get my final answer. I've solved for y. I have y on one side, and then I moved everything else to the right-hand side. So y is equal to 2x plus 6. Now let's take a look at this last problem. It says solve for c. So I have a equals 1/2 c plus 25. On the right-hand side, kind of focus on the right-hand side because that's where my variable c is, but I have this term here, 1/2 c, and then I have this term here, this plus 25. Again, when you have more than one term, try to get rid of the other term besides c first. So I need to get rid of this positive 25 first. Well, to undo a positive 25, I have to take away 25. I have to do the inverse operation. And what I do to one side, my right-hand side of my equation, I have to do to the left-hand side. So I'm also going to take away 25 on this side. Notice I didn't write it right underneath a because a and 25, they're not like terms. A is a variable, and -25 or -25, it's a constant. Don't confuse it with, we're not combining it with the number of our problem. So let's go ahead and simplify. On the left-hand side, I have my a, my variable a, and then I have my -25. Again, cannot combine them. They're not like terms. So I just bring it down as it is. On the right-hand side, though, I still have this 1/2 c. So 1/2 c. And then this positive 25, I took away 25, so it actually went away. 25 minus 25 is just 0, so that's gone. So now I'm left with this equation. C is still not by itself. I now need to get rid of this 1/2. Well, how do I get rid of fractions? I multiply again by the reciprocal. Well, the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2 over 1. So I'm going to multiply this side by the reciprocal of 1/2, which is 2 over 1. Essentially what I'm multiplying by, 2 over 1 is just essentially 2. I'm multiplying by 2. Well, I have to do the exact same thing on the other side, the left-hand side, but be very careful. I'm multiplying everything on the left-hand side by 2. So all of this stuff, a minus 25, is being multiplied by 2. That's why I throw it in parentheses to emphasize that this 2 is being distributed or multiplying both of those terms. So on the left-hand side, I have 2 multiplying my a and multiplying this minus 25. That's why it's in parentheses. And that's all equal to, on the right-hand side, again, I multiply by 2 over 1. So I have 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. They essentially cancel each other out. 2 divided by 2 is just 1. Same thing with this 1 on top, 1 on the bottom. They cancel each other out. So those fractions, again, when you multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, the fractions just go away. And what I'm left with is just this little old variable c. And I have my final answer. You could also show this distribution. If you leave your solution like this, I will accept it. Or you could have written it, so showing this distribution, you could have expressed your answer as 2 times a, and then 2 times a -25 is a -50, all equal to c. I would have also accepted this. So either is fine. Either not doing the distribution or actually showing the distribution. So with that said, after this lesson, I'm giving everybody 2.6 day 2 homework or practice, and I'm asking them to do both sides. So 1 through 6 on the front, and then there's some word problems and additional problems on the back. So a total of 10 problems. So this is Wednesday night's homework. Check it on Thursday. And then on Thursday, again, we are moving into a review session for the test. And then Friday will be the actual test. I'm guessing that a lot of Thursday will be still kind of talking about especially in extension, talking about literal equations, because I expect for this to be really difficult for people to understand. So I highly encourage you to ask questions, not only in extension, but also come to my second period ASP to get help, because these are tough. Thanks, Emily. I hope